Deep in history, amidst the sands of ancient Egypt, within a tomb unopened for millennia, lived a young king, but his legacy surpassed that of all kings. Tonight at Midnight Haven, we bring you the story of the Golden Pharaoh, Tutankhamun, a life story brimming with secrets, gold, and glory, from his childhood in the palace through his years of rule to the discovery that shook the world. Before we begin our journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video so you can stay updated on all the exciting and captivating stories to come. Let's begin the story of the young king's birth. In Akhenaten's palace, where the walls gleamed with golden sunlight, morning spilled through the tall columned windows, casting patterns across the ornate floors. The first sounds of the day were only the whispers of the court, servants and guards preparing to witness a momentous event, the birth of the new heir. The mother, Queen Kia, sat upon the royal seat, breathing slowly, while priests observed the subtle rhythms of the world around them. There was a strange sense of anticipation, as if the sun itself waited to shine upon this child, whose name would one day be remembered forever. In the corner, Akhenaten, the ambitious pharaoh who had upended Egypt with his new teachings, watched cautiously. He was not just a father, but a man fearful for his religious and political legacy. His gaze shifted between his newborn son and the walls adorned with images of the new gods, as if his heart questioned, would this child continue his dream or return to the old ways? The child was born delicate, his body frail, yet his eyes held an unusual spark, unlike anything the court had seen before. One priest whispered cautiously, "He will play a great role, but the path ahead will not be easy." As days passed, the young boy began to recognize the sounds of the palace, the footsteps of the servants, the hushed whispers of priests hiding between the columns. He listened to Akhenaten's stories about the sun, the new city of Akhenaten, and the sudden absence of the old gods from the hearts of the people. A memorable moment came when he met his sister, Akhenaten, a young girl who shared his games and guided him through the palace, her eyes full of curiosity and courage. A silent bond began to form between them, a quiet understanding that carried more than words, an unspoken connection to an uncertain future. At the heart of all this, the young boy lived his first days, drinking royal milk, hearing tales, and feeling the first pulse of the new Egypt, where everything hung on the edge of change, and where everything waited to be written by this small child who would one day become Tutankhamun. The royal family and religious conflicts. In the royal palace, not everything was as it seemed. The ornate walls gleamed in the sunlight, but behind this brilliance lay a silence heavy with anxiety. The royal family was not merely a facade of prosperity, but a tangled web of loyalty and conflict, love and fear, tradition and new beliefs. Akhenaten, the pharaoh who had transformed Egypt into a monolithic center of sun worship, watched everything with a discerning eye. The religious disagreements between him and the high priests were not hidden. They were concealed behind formal smiles and royal ceremonies. Queen Kia tried to shield her young son from these conflicts, from the tensions that might affect him even before he was born. She lulled him to sleep and whispered stories of the sun, of the light illuminating the new city, attempting to instill in him a sense of security amidst the maelstrom of power and politics.
Meanwhile, Akhenaten, his younger sister, observed everything with the keen eye of a child, learning the secrets of the palace and the deceptions hidden between words and smiles. They shared an unspoken bond, a silent understanding, a mutual protection, as if they both knew the world would be unkind to either of them. In those days, Tutankhamun began to grasp the realities of royal life. Power comes with responsibility. Loyalty is not always guaranteed. And religion can be more of a source of conflict than a comfort. Yet, deep down, the young prince felt that he was part of a larger story, that his destiny would leave its mark on Egypt despite all the controversy surrounding him.
His life in Akhenaten city. The city of Akhenaten was a marvel of light, iron, and gold. Its streets shimmered in the sun, as if every stone spoke of the one God worshipped by the kingdom. The tall columns, adorned with golden sunlight, and the daily scenes of courtiers and priests created an atmosphere of enchantment, yet also one fraught with challenges and a fear of the unknown. The young Tutankhamun, despite his tender age, lived each day as if it were a lesson in politics, religion, and art all at once. He moved between the palace and the open areas of the city, listening to the guards speak of the dawn rituals and watching the priests chant hymns and carry the symbols of the god Aten from the great temple to the decorated streets. Curiosity filled his eyes, and every movement and every sound was an opportunity to learn something new about the world he was born into. The temples were not merely places of worship, but also educational laboratories for the young king. Tut witnessed the sacrificial rituals, not understanding every detail, but simply observing the order and precision in everything taught him about discipline and discipline. The priests who guarded the secrets of the new religion tried to explain to him simply the sun as a symbol of life, the light that filled the city, and the sudden disappearance of the old gods. Amidst all this, there was a strict daily routine: drinking royal milk, short walks between the palace and temples, simple lessons in history and politics, and playing with his sister, Akhenaten. Their games were not mere entertainment. They were a way to learn patience, observation, and decision-making, for each game held a lesson in royal life. Their shared laughter was precious, moments that kept the child's heart beating amidst the sea of power and pressure surrounding him. But life in Akhenaten was not just laughter and play. The young boy began to notice the whispers and anxieties among the priests and courtiers, how they spoke in hushed tones about the old worship, about the people's shifting loyalties, about the invisible power struggles among the leaders. All of this was planting in his young mind an early awareness of the complex world in which he would one day become king. Akhenaten, his father, watched his every move, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a stern gaze. He knew that every passing moment would shape his heir's character, and that the light and shadows in the new city were not merely a sight, but a lesson in power and responsibility. Queen Kia, with her gentleness and tenderness, protected him from all harm, cradling him and telling him stories of the sun, light, and life, trying to instill in him a sense of security amidst all this change. There were also small moments that revealed his character, his restless curiosity, his eyes wide with wonder at the events around him, his attempts to imitate adults, and his ability to learn from every action, no matter how small. And with all this, a glimmer of determination and courage began to appear in his eyes, something that distinguished this little boy from the other children in the palace,
something that whispered that he might one day become a pharaoh who would rule Egypt in a way that would be remembered throughout history. The city of Akhenaten, with all its beauty and mystery, was more than just a place to live. It was a complete experience that shaped the mind and heart of the young king, planting within him the first seeds of understanding that royal life was not merely about a throne and gold, but about responsibility, study, and observing everyone around him. Knowing that every action and every word could have far-reaching consequences. At the end of the day, the child would return to his royal chamber, gaze at the golden light streaming through the high windows, and close his eyes, feeling that the world was bigger than he had imagined, and that he had to grow and strengthen to be a part of it, to leave his own mark on Egypt, the city of the sun, despite all the challenges and conflicts that surrounded him.
His illness and physical weakness. Even in the heart of the luminous palace in Akhenaten, something distinguished the young Tutankhamun from his peers. His body was slightly weaker than other children, and his movements were sometimes hesitant and tentative. This was not a flaw in his character, but rather a small challenge that demanded patience and caution from a young age. Queen Kia noticed this weakness from his earliest days and treated it not with anxiety, but with care and tenderness. She knew that a child's strength was not measured solely by physical strength, but also by intellect and courage. She would rock him and whisper reassuring words. "Strength is not always in the feet, my child, but in the heart and mind." With each word, Tutankhamun felt secure and began to understand that his physical weakness would not prevent him from one day becoming a great pharaoh. Life in the palace taught him how to cope with this difference. There were simple training schedules. He walked cautiously, learned to stand steadily, and even his playtime with his sister, Akhenaten, was designed to help him develop his physical abilities without straining himself. Servants and guards watched him carefully, offering support without making him feel different or limited. But physical weakness wasn't the only obstacle. There was also the pressure of royal expectations. Priests and advisors watched him, and the pharaoh himself envisioned an heir capable of continuing his legacy. This early pressure made the child understand, without being taught, that leadership wasn't easy, and that every pharaoh, no matter how young, had to be patient and persistent. In these early days, Tutankhamun began to show signs of an early maturity. He would stand for longer periods before images of the gods, observe the guards and soldiers, listen to stories about previous kings, and wonder with childlike eyes about the meaning of everything he saw around him. Curiosity and courage balanced his physical frailty, making him a different kind of child, a child who would one day become a pharaoh capable of facing far greater challenges. There were intimate moments with his mother and sister when his body weakened and he needed reassurance. Kia would sit by his side for hours, telling him about the sun, about ancient Egypt, about hope for the future. And Akhenaten, with a blend of innocence and courage, would protect him and play with him in ways that helped him grow and learn. These moments were not mere play, but early lessons in love, support, and courage, the foundation of any true leader. Despite all the challenges, there was an inner feeling in the child's heart that he was capable of learning, of growing, and that his physical weakness did not mean he was weak in spirit or mind. Every day he gained new experience, learned a new lesson about the world, about power, and about himself, and began to shape the character that would become Tutankhamun,
the pharaoh who would attempt to return Egypt to its ancient path after the reign of Akhenaten. At the end of the day, the child would lie in his royal bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the palace, thinking about the games he had played, the lessons he had learned, and the stories his eyes and heart had heard. He knew one thing without a doubt, that despite all the hardships, he would grow up to be part of Egypt's great story, and that his true strength would come from his heart and mind, not just his body.
Early bonds with Ankh-as-in-Amun. In the corridors of the royal palace, young Ankh-as-in-Amun moved nimbly among the luminous columns of Akhenaten, her curiosity and courage like a small torch. The young Tutankhamun, despite his physical frailty, found in her a companion for his daily adventures, a partner in learning, and a quiet protector from the vast and complex world of the palace. Their relationship was more than just that of traditional siblings. It was an early bond built on mutual understanding and silent support. Ankh-as-in-Amun gave him confidence when he hesitated, encouraged him to try new things, and shared games with him that taught him lessons in patience, observation, and decision-making. Every moment together was an early training in leadership, in understanding people, and in handling pressure intelligently and quietly. In their shared days, the child discovered how life could be filled with small moments that shape character. They watched the guards and priests, noticed the minor disagreements among the advisors, and tried to decipher the language of gestures and whispers in the palace. These observations, which adults might have considered trivial or even insignificant, nourished young Tutankhamun's mind, building within him an early awareness of the world he would one day inhabit. Ankh-as-in-Amun was also learning from her brother. Often, his curiosity and questions about the sun, the gods, and the new city inspired her to think more deeply about her role in the palace, her place in royal life, and the importance of the relationships that bound the royal family to the court and the people. Their intimate moments were not limited to play and observation. Sometimes they would sit near a window overlooking the city, watching the son of Akhenaten climb the sky and listening to the priests chanting their hymns. This sense of peace and connection to the city and the heavens was a source of inner strength for them, teaching them that leadership was not merely external power, but an inner understanding of the world and of others. This relationship also formed part of his emotional and social development. Tutankhamun learned to be cautious yet compassionate, to protect those he loved and trust those worthy of trust, and to understand that strength lies not only in the throne or the body, but in the heart, the mind, and the ability to connect with others authentically. In all these moments, Tutankhamun felt something extraordinary, that Ankh-as-in-Amun's presence made him stronger, braver, and more prepared to face the future. He knew subconsciously that despite his young age, he shared with her a life journey that would later unite them in a way that transcended mere brotherhood, a path filled with challenges and responsibilities, but also with the light, warmth, and intimacy that would become an integral part of his royal character. At the end of the day, they would return to their royal quarters, each carrying within them a sense of peace, connection, and a silent understanding of the world. Thus, Ankh-as-in-Amun from childhood formed an integral part of Tutankhamun's life, a bond that would remain with him throughout his days, a quiet force behind every future challenge and early memories of boundless love, support, and friendship.
The return of the ancient gods. Despite all that Akhenaten built in Akhenaten, the sun temples and the new rituals, the memories of the ancient gods never completely disappeared from the hearts of the Egyptian people. There were whispers among the people, small murmurs of the ancient gods of Thebes, of Ra and Osiris, and of the rituals they had practiced since ancient times. Tutankhamun, the young king, began to notice these small gaps between the official world that surrounded him and the real world in which the people lived. He heard servants whispering ancient stories of festivals and seasons no longer celebrated openly, and of priests who, despite the new power, had not abandoned their old beliefs. Queen Kia tried to shield him from any shock, but she also did not hide the truth entirely. She told him about ancient Egypt, about the balance between the sun and the earth, about the gods who shaped history, and about the people who carried those memories in their hearts. In this way, Tutankhamun began to understand something important, that true power lies not in imposing a complete transformation on the world, but in balancing the old and the new, ambition and tradition. Within the palace, the outlines of new conflicts began to quietly take shape. Some priests, dissatisfied with the abrupt shift to the worship of Aten alone, began secretly to revive ancient rituals, teaching the children of the royal family lessons in the rites of ancient Egypt. Tutankhamun, with eyes full of curiosity, observed these small changes, learning about history and identity, and realizing that his father's legacy was not the end of the story, but one chapter in the long history of Egypt. In quiet moments, he would sit by a window overlooking the city, watching the people in their markets, listening to the bustle of daily life, and observing the delicate balance between the traditions of the past and the changes brought about by Akhenaten. He knew, without words, that some things should be respected, some could be changed, and that the wisdom of a king lay in knowing the difference.
How he was chosen as king. After Akhenaten's death, a mixture of grief and confusion gripped the palace and the city. Egypt, which had been at the mercy of Tutankhamun's father's erratic policies, suddenly found itself facing a power vacuum and anxiety about the future. The court and priests were on tenterhooks, all eyes fixed on the young Tutankhamun, barely out of infancy. Queen Kia, with her characteristic tenderness, tried to shield him from the clamor of the palace and the court's anxieties. But she knew the moment was approaching, the moment when an heir to the throne would have to appear. In the palace corridors, the high priests and advisors began to meet in silence, discussing Egypt's future. The conversation was not simply about choosing a child to be pharaoh, but a matter of destiny. Who would be able to balance power, restore the people to their ancient traditions, and reinstate the stability that had been shattered under Akhenaten? The choice was not easy. There was immense political pressure. The generals wanted a leader who could maintain control of the army. The priests wanted an heir to protect the ancient religion, and the royal court wanted the family line of power to continue unbroken. Amidst all this, the young Tutankhamun, with his curious eyes, observed the world around him, unaware of what awaited him. The process itself was meticulous and ritualistic. The senior priests, after lengthy deliberations, decided to declare the child the heir, not only because he was the son of the previous king, but also because he was the only one capable of bridging the old and the new, of reconciling the legacy of Akhenaten with the ancient traditions that still lived in the hearts of the people. On the day of the proclamation, the entire palace gathered in silence, joy and apprehension mingling in the air. Tutankhamun raised his small head, looking at the crowds around him, at the priests bearing the symbols of authority, at his unknown father present in his image, and at the people watching him with eyes wide open to the future. That moment marked the beginning of a long journey, the start of a responsibility the child was not yet ready for, but a moment that would determine his fate and the fate of all of Egypt. His young heart, despite its fear, knew one thing, that he would become a pharaoh, and that the decisions to come would shape the history of an entire nation.
The role of priests and military leaders. After Tutankhamun was declared heir to the throne, the palace was in turmoil. Despite the child's young innocence, powerful figures within the palace were watching him closely. Priests, military leaders, and advisors, each with their own expectations and interests. The senior priests, who carried the legacy of the old religion, immediately began formulating a plan to balance their power with the new king's rule. For them, Tutankhamun was not merely an heir, but a hope for restoring Egypt to its ancient traditions and reviving the rituals that had disappeared during Akhenaten's reign. They knew that the child, despite his young age, was observant and inquisitive, and that his early education was the only opportunity to cultivate a balance between the old and the new. Meanwhile, the military leaders and soldiers loyal to the old throne saw him as a symbol of stability, but they feared his frailty and youth. Secret meetings were held in the palace corridors, where the leaders plotted to ensure the security of the capital and protect the throne, all in the absence of a mature pharaoh capable of making his own decisions. The young Tutankhamun observed all these silent movements. He didn't understand the intricacies of the political intrigues, but he sensed the anxieties and divisions within the palace. Some days he would stand behind the palace pillars, watching the priests discuss ancient rituals and listening to the generals talk about army movements and potential threats from neighboring cities and tribes. Queen Kia and his sister, Akhenaten, were his support during this period. Kia taught him patience and observation, whispering wisely, "A king rules not only with force, but also with reason and knowledge." Akhenaten shared games with him that contained hidden messages about strategy and patience, so that the two began to understand that every action and word could have far-reaching consequences. Amidst all this, the child began to learn the art of negotiation and balancing indirectly. He heard how the priests spoke diplomatically about ancient rituals, how the military leaders tried to impose their vision of peace and security, and how everything intertwined with the people's desire to preserve their ancient identity. All these observations, which might seem trivial to adults, were part of building the character of the future pharaoh, the child who would come to understand politics, religion, and the people simultaneously. Even at a young age, a glimpse of his innate wisdom began to emerge. He could discern who could be trusted and who needed to be watched. He began to distinguish genuine voices from deceptive whispers, and he displayed a remarkable interest in justice and balance. All these small qualities indicated that despite his age and physical frailty, he would become a pharaoh capable of facing the great challenges that awaited him. By the end of the chapter, Tutankhamun was no longer just a child in a vast palace, but the young heir to the throne who was beginning to understand the true responsibilities of kingship, protecting the family, listening to the priests, dealing with the leaders, and knowing that his authority was not merely a title, but a duty to Egypt and its people.
Changing his name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun. Upon ascending the throne, Tutankhamun faced a delicate and pivotal moment in his young life, rebalancing his father's legacy with the authenticity of ancient Egypt. His birth name, Tutankhaten, reflected his father's devotion to the sun god Aten, but it clashed with the traditions of the Egyptian people, who still cherished the ancient gods of Thebes. The old priests, clinging to traditional beliefs, began to emphasize the necessity of restoring a name associated with the ancient gods to legitimize the young pharaoh in the eyes of the people. For them, the name was not merely a word, but a political and religious symbol, a bridge between the past and the present, and the key to restoring stability to the kingdom. Despite his young age, Tutankhamun understood the significance of his name, thanks to his mother Kia's lessons and his own natural curiosity. Kia explained to him the meaning of every letter, every symbol, every word, and how the name reflected the pharaoh's role not only as ruler, but also as protector of religion, the people, and history. "Your name is your soul before the people, my child," she would tell him.
his awareness gradually expanding toward an understanding of the symbolism of the throne and power. In the official proclamation ceremony, the new name was declared to be Tutankhamun, meaning the living image of the god Amun. Priests carried the symbols and statues, and the child was transported from the old temple to the new one amidst meticulous ceremonies, watched by the people, soldiers, and advisors alike. Every movement, every smile, every glance of the child held profound meaning, the beginning of a new era, a return to ancient traditions while preserving the legacy of Akhenaten. The change was not merely a religious ritual, but a political lesson. The child learned how a carefully considered change could reconcile disparate interests, how the pharaoh could be a bridge between the hearts of the people and the priests of religion and power. Tutankhamun's ability to understand the balance between strength and mercy, between courage and patience, began to emerge, and the true contours of his character began to appear for the first time before his court and the people. This decision had a profound impact on his early relationships with the priests and military leaders. Some were relieved by the renewed recognition of Amun, while others began to observe cautiously, wondering if the child was capable of bearing the burden of power. With his young mind and inquisitive spirit, Tutankhamun began to notice these interactions and understand that every decision, however simple it might seem, carried with it great responsibilities and far-reaching consequences. The ceremonies were not merely displays of power, they were opportunities for learning. The child watched the priests perform the rituals meticulously, how the military leaders managed the crowds, and how everyone maintained discipline and respect. These small, repetitive scenes taught Tutankhamun his first lessons in leadership: discipline, understanding, and the ability to balance the old with the new. Over time, the new name became a symbol of the young monarchy's identity, and the people began to welcome the young pharaoh not only as the son of Akhenaten, but also as a protector of their traditions and culture. Thus, the change was not merely a change of name, but the beginning of the young pharaoh's journey to understand power, politics, and religion, a journey that would continue to shape Egypt during his short and challenging reign.
The capital's move to Thebes. After establishing his position as Tutankhamun, the biggest decision came: moving the capital from Akhenaten to ancient Thebes. This was not merely a geographical change, but a monumental political and religious step aimed at restoring Egypt to its roots and rebalancing the legacy of Akhenaten with the old religion. Thebes was the heart of ancient Egypt. Its colossal temples, small pyramids, and bustling streets bore witness to a long history of rulers who had come before him. The priests, who had been observing the city from afar, were relieved by this move, as it restored the ancient symbolism and confirmed that the new pharaoh respected tradition. Even the young Tutankhamun, despite his tender age, began to notice the differences between the cities. Akhenaten, illuminated by its golden columns and orderly streets, versus the ancient Thebes, steeped in history, the scent of the fields, and the bustle of the markets. He felt that returning to Thebes was not just a relocation, but a lesson in understanding the true Egypt, its people, its culture, and its history spanning thousands of years. The new palace in Thebes was vastly different from the one at Akhenaten. The old walls, the wide staircases, and the portraits of previous kings on the columns reminded Tutankhamun that each pharaoh stood on the shoulders of his predecessors. There was also the new royal entourage: soldiers, priests, and advisors, all with different experiences and backgrounds than those of the former capital. This meant the boy began to grasp the political and social complexities of the situation from a young age.
The move was not easy. There were logistical, ritual, and even political challenges. The priests wanted to ensure that every new temple in Thebes reflected the old heritage and complemented the religious symbols, while the generals wanted to protect the palace and the army's movements during the relocation. Tutankhamun was present in almost every detail, observing the preparations, listening to the plans, and beginning to understand the magnitude of the responsibility placed upon him. The new city taught him an early lesson in leadership, that power lies not only in the throne, but also in the ability to manage people, balance the priests and the military leaders, and protect the old heritage while embracing the new. This moment also gave him the opportunity to understand that ruling Egypt wasn't confined to the palace, but extended to the people, to the markets, to the fields, and to everyone who depended on the king's power and justice. On quiet evenings, Tutankhamun would sit by the window watching Thebes in the setting light, seeing that life went on regardless of changing thrones or names. He sensed, without words, that his future task would not be easy, that he had to quickly learn how to be a pharaoh who protected Egypt's history and balanced the light of the sun with the shadows of the past. With this transition, a new era began for Egypt and a new era for Tutankhamun, the child who began to understand that ruling was not merely a title, but a continuous journey of learning, balancing, and wisdom, a journey that would shape all his future decisions.
Coronation and the rituals of reign. On a sunny morning in Thebes, the people, the court, and the priests gathered to witness an event that had not occurred for many years, the coronation of Tutankhamun as King of Egypt. The streets were filled with people who had come from the surrounding villages and towns. Soldiers stood in formation in their formal attire, and priests carried the symbols of the ancient gods. Everything was alive with life and ritual. The young boy, barely out of infancy, sat on a temporary throne, surrounded by high priests and commanders. The moment was heavy with symbolism, the beginning of a new era for Egypt, a rebalancing of the old and the new, and a great responsibility placed upon the shoulders of a young child. The rituals began with offerings to the gods. Priests carried statues and sacred symbols to the great temple, while Tutankhamun watched with eyes filled with both curiosity and awe. Every movement, every word held profound meaning, an affirmation of authority, a protection of the kingdom, and a show of respect for both the people and the gods. During the celebrations, the child learned his first lessons in direct rule, how to use gestures to express strength and mercy, how to show respect to the priests, and how to balance the people's fear and love. Everything was meticulously planned, and every small step he took was a lesson in leadership and political awareness. The royal robes, the crown, the scepter, and all the symbols that weighed down his small shoulders were not mere decorations. They were educational tools that taught him the meaning of power, the duty to protect, and the history embodied in every stone and every column. His mother, Kia, encouraged him, cradled him, and reminded him that power resided not only in the throne, but also in the heart, the mind, and the ability to make the right decision at the right time. The people, for their part, watched this little boy with hopeful eyes. For them, Tutankhamun was not just an heir, but a symbol of restoring balance after the conflicts of Akhenaten's reign. The priests and elders knew that every movement, smile, or word from the new pharaoh would build the people's trust and establish a lasting relationship between the king and his citizens. As the days following his coronation passed, the child began to learn the art of making small decisions, allocating resources, overseeing the temples, monitoring the soldiers, and understanding the people's desires. These seemingly insignificant moments were life lessons no less important than any formal ceremony. At the conclusion of the celebrations, Tutankhamun sat upon his new throne, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also a growing inner strength. He knew subconsciously that this was not just a single day, but a long journey that would lead him to shape Egypt, revive his father's legacy, and safeguard ancient traditions in a way no one had ever known before. With this coronation, Tutankhamun became the rightful king of Egypt, the child bearing the name of Amun, inheriting the power of the past and ushering in a new era of balance, strength, and awareness. With each passing day, the seeds of the great pharaoh that Egypt would remember for centuries began to sprout within the young boy. Rebuilding the temples. As the days passed since his ascension to the throne, Tutankhamun, despite his young age, realized that his most important task as pharaoh was not merely to bear the title or wear the crown, but to restore ancient Egypt through its temples and rituals. The temples were the heart of Egyptian life, the conduit for both the soul and society, and every stone within them held a message from Egypt's past and future. The campaign began by sending engineers and priests throughout the kingdom to assess the condition of the ancient temples. Some had been abandoned since the reign of Akhenaten, while others had been modified to serve only the worship of the sun. Tutankhamun's mission was to restore these temples to their former glory, so that they would reflect the power of traditional deities like Amun, Ra, and Osiris, and re-establish the people's faith in both the god and the ruler. In the heart of the new capital, Thebes, the great construction work began. The young king wandered among the massive columns, watching the reliefs emerge from the walls, and observing the craftsmen as they meticulously laid stone upon stone. Every inscription and every symbol held religious and political meaning, teaching the people, elders, and priests that the pharaoh was protecting the past while simultaneously building the future. From this experience, the young boy learned the importance of planning and patience. Building temples was no quick task. It was a long process, fraught with challenges, shortages of materials, labor problems, and the need to coordinate priests and religious structures. But Tutankhamun began to realize that every calculated step, every small decision, could impact the future. This project also gave him the opportunity to connect directly with the people. He visited the surrounding villages, observed the farmers and craftsmen, listened to their problems, and understood their needs. He learned that power lay not only in golden walls and colossal statues, but in the king's ability to listen, understand the people, and balance the interests of the state, religion, and the nation. Each renovated temple had a story. Some conveyed a message about restoring balance between the worship of Aten and the gods of ancient Egypt. Some reflected appreciation for the kingdom's soldiers and craftsmen, while others demonstrated the royal wisdom in integrating the old with the new. All these symbols served as lessons for Tutankhamun, the child who began to see himself not only as the heir to the throne, but also as the guardian of Egypt's spiritual and material heritage. With each passing day, his early leadership skills emerged: the ability to make decisive decisions, an understanding of the impact of every action on the court and priests, and a sense of responsibility towards the people. These early experiences shaped his character, making the young boy who would become a pharaoh know how to balance power, religion, and the people.
By the end of the temple reconstruction project, there were not only beautiful buildings and renewed rituals, but also a clear symbol of the restoration of ancient Egypt and the emergence of Tutankhamun as a king capable of combining the legacy of the past with the ambitions of the future. A child who began his reign with a great mission and established a legacy that would endure for millennia.
As the days of his reign passed, Tutankhamun began to feel the weight of the legacy left to him by his father, Akhenaten. It was not merely a royal inheritance, but a complex religious and social one, fraught with conflicts and divisions between those who embraced the worship of the sun and those who clung to the old gods. The young king, despite his youth, quickly learned that repairing the damage of the past was not simply a political task, but a profound lesson in understanding people and history. The old priests pointed to the need to restore balance to the temples, the rituals of the people, and royal traditions, while the generals saw change as an opportunity to rebuild the army and restore stability to the kingdom. His first steps included restoring the traditional symbols of the temples. Statues of a moon were returned to their places, ancient rituals were performed again, and annual festivals were resumed. All these steps were carefully calculated to avoid direct conflict and to ensure the young king appeared as a protector of tradition, not merely a follower of it. During this process, Tutankhamun began to understand the hidden conflicts between the people and their leaders. Some priests still harbored silent resentment over Akhenaten's reforms, and some generals were concerned about the young king's physical frailty, but they noticed his curiosity and quick learning, and gradually began to respect him. The young king began to learn the art of balance and reconciliation, restoring ancient rituals without attacking those who had embraced the worship of Aten, projecting power to the priests without humiliating the soldiers, and protecting his father's legacy while offering the people a message of hope that Egypt was capable of moving forward. This period was an opportunity for Tutankhamun to understand governance not merely as a force, but as a delicate art. How a pharaoh could rectify the past without inciting new conflicts, how to balance religion and politics, and how to build a strong popular base to protect the kingdom. His innate leadership qualities also began to emerge. The ability to observe closely, to understand the true intentions of those around him, and to take small steps that led to significant changes. These early experiences, despite his young age, shaped the character of the future pharaoh, a ruler who understood that power resided not only in the throne, but also in the mind, the heart, and the balance between the old and the new. As time passed, the people began to feel that there was a young pharaoh who understood them, a child who had not forgotten the past nor rejected the future, a child who combined caution and courage, wisdom and mercy, strength and tenderness. Thus, Tutankhamun's reign gradually began to establish itself, leading Egypt out of the conflicts of the past and laying the foundation for a short but rich and invaluable era. Military campaigns. With his authority consolidated in Thebes and internal stability restored, Tutankhamun, the young boy king, faced a new challenge: protecting Egypt's borders and maintaining security in neighboring regions. This was not merely a military matter, but a test of his abilities in governance, decision-making, and understanding the world beyond the palace. Despite his young age, the boy accompanied military leaders during the planning of campaigns. He did not directly participate in battles,
but his presence and direct observation were part of his royal training. He would sit on a small hill overlooking a symbolic map of Egypt's borders, listening to the generals discuss strategies and learning the difference between raw power and the wisdom in its use. The campaigns were not simply about fighting, but also about political and diplomatic messaging. Egypt at that time was keen to assert its control over strategic cities and oases and to protect vital trade routes. The soldiers, initially skeptical of the boy's understanding, began to notice his curiosity and attention to detail, the deployment of troops, the monitoring of supplies, and ensuring the safety of the roads. The child king learned not only about power, but also about humane leadership. He watched his soldiers endure fatigue and hunger, and began to consider ways to support them, improve their living conditions, and protect their lives as much as possible. The priests, who sometimes accompanied the campaigns, explained to him how the gods could grant power to a ruler, and how victory lay not only in battle, but also in justice and wise decision-making. One of the most important lessons Tutankhamun learned during these campaigns was the importance of observation and long-term planning. It wasn't simply about following orders, but about understanding the terrain, knowing the army's capabilities, and anticipating the reactions of allies and enemies. All these early experiences shaped the young king's mind, preparing him to be a ruler capable of balancing power with wisdom. At the same time, another facet of his personality began to emerge: a love for his people and a concern for their well-being. He listened to reports from commanders about the cities affected by the campaigns, about the merchants and farmers, and inquired about the best ways to support them after the military operations concluded. He was not merely a child observing events, but an heir to the throne, beginning to understand that a true ruler cares for the lives of his people as much as he cares for the protection of his borders. And so, the features of the complete pharaoh began to gradually take shape in the mind and soul of the young boy, amidst the din of battles, the clamor of the army, the whispers of the priests, and the sunlight shining on the timeless Egyptian desert.
His life in the palace. The royal palace in Thebes was more than just a building. It was a world unto itself. Every corner, every hall, every column told a story of power, history, and the Egyptian spirit. Tutankhamun, the young boy, had lived within this world since birth, but now, after his coronation, he was beginning to understand the magnitude of the responsibility placed upon him. Early each morning, the halls buzzed with life. Servants laid out food, priests performed the morning rituals, and soldiers inspected the guard around the palace. The child king moved amidst these sounds and colors, observing everyone with keen eyes, each movement a lesson in leadership and observation. His mother, Queen Kia, watched him closely, teaching him the arts of kingship step by step: how to walk among the great columns without arousing awe, how to greet the priests and soldiers with respect and wisdom, and how to speak with the senior courtiers without appearing weak or fearful. As the days passed, Tutankhamun began to get to know the courtiers and advisors personally. Each of them brought a different kind of expertise. Some were experts in religious rituals, others specialized in financial or military affairs, and still others were wise men knowledgeable in history and tradition. The child king began to grasp the importance of listening to every opinion, how each advisor could be a guide, and how every word could carry wisdom or a warning. In his free time, Tutankhamun would play with Akhenaten, learning early leadership skills through games, planning, weighing different options,
and keen observation of others. The games gradually increased in complexity, sometimes involving the distribution of symbolic resources and sometimes observing small soldiers representing the people. The child king also began to notice the daily challenges of the palace: supply problems, minor squabbles among the bards, and rumors circulating among the court. All these observations contributed to building his political and social awareness, teaching him what it means to be a true pharaoh, not just in terms of formal power, but in the ability to govern people and understand their needs. The nights in the palace were rare moments of peace. Tutankhamun sat by a window overlooking the city, watching the distant lights, listening to the sounds of the markets, and feeling that his royal life was more connected to his people than it appeared. In those moments, he understood something important. The throne was not merely a place, but a constant responsibility, demanding patience, wisdom, and a compassionate heart. By the end of the chapter, the palace had become a school of life and leadership for Tutankhamun, where each day brought new lessons in politics, religion, administration, and mercy, gradually shaping his royal character into the pharaoh Egypt would forever remember.
His relationship with his father's servants and advisors. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the palace and the daily bustle of the court, there were quiet yet influential figures in Tutankhamun's life, his father's servants who chose to remain as advisors to the young pharaoh. These men and women, who had lived through Akhenaten's reign and its conflicts, brought with them years of experience and a profound understanding of the delicate balance between power, religion, and the people. From them, the child king learned his first lessons in analysis and a deep understanding of events. They calmly explained to him how politics and religion were intertwined, and how even the smallest action could affect the entire kingdom. It wasn't just theoretical instruction. It was practical, observation, reflection, and an understanding of the relationships between people both inside and outside the palace. One of the senior servants, named Ba, a wise man with white hair and sharp eyes, would tell Tutankhamun stories of past kings, their mistakes and triumphs, and how they protected the kingdom without harming the people. Each story was a lesson in leadership, and each piece of advice was an opportunity for the child to begin developing his own wisdom. Through these mentors, Tutankhamun began to understand the value of patience and composure. He learned that great decisions are not made impulsively, and that a king's strength lies in his ability to wait and observe before acting. He also learned that some problems require listening more than speaking, and that every word can carry more weight than a stone against a wall. The mentors taught him not only politics, but also the ethics of kingship, justice, mercy, protecting the weak, and respecting both priests and the people. They constantly reminded him that the pharaoh was not merely a person on a throne, but a living symbol of Egypt itself, responsible for the past, present, and future. During playtime or breaks, the mentors used simple activities to teach the child leadership skills, assigning tasks to young guards, organizing small events, or even fairly resolving disputes among palace servants. Each activity carried a subtle message about authority, wisdom, and justice. And so, as the days passed, these mentors became an integral part of shaping Tutankhamun's character. The child king began to learn not only what to do, but also how to think like a pharaoh, how to balance power and mercy, the old and the new, and how to be a leader who would protect Egypt's heritage
and safeguard its people. By the end of this chapter, Tutankhamun was no longer just a child on the throne, but a true heir, a child gradually molded into a pharaoh capable of facing life's challenges and ruling with intelligence and wisdom, armed with the experiences and wisdom of those who lived before him.
Art, gold, and treasures. As his power was consolidated, Tutankhamun began to feel that the king was not only the protector of the state and the people, but also the guardian of Egyptian culture, art, and glory. The royal palace was not merely a place of governance, but a vast workshop of creativity and art, where gold, precious stones, and symbolic inscriptions wove history and religion together in their most magnificent form. The boy king would spend long hours observing craftsmen and artists as they created small statues and ornate paintings. Each piece carried religious and political symbolism. A statue of the god Amun, a gold crown representing royal authority, or a painting telling the story of Egypt's victory over its enemies. The priests explained to him that art is the language of the soul and that every inscription and every stone has a message. Tutankhamun did not simply observe, he began to demonstrate his own artistic sensibility, choosing colors, paying attention to the details of the inscriptions, and even offering simple ideas to improve some of the works. He expressed his love for gold and art not only as adornments, but as tools for educating the people, strengthening national spirit, and protecting Egypt's heritage. The gold that adorned the palace and temples was not merely wealth, but a symbol of power and royal immortality. The young king learned that treasures were not just for show, but a means to empower the state, support the priests, and finance military and civilian projects. Every penny was accounted for, and every piece was crafted with care to reflect Egypt's standing in the world. During this period, Tutankhamun began to develop an ability to balance beauty and power. He understood that art should reflect strength, but it should also convey a message of compassion and wisdom, serving as a bridge between the king and his people. Artists and craftsmen began to respect this young boy who appreciated their work and listened to their opinions, making the palace a vibrant and creative hub. Tutankhamun also learned that treasures were not just for the pharaoh, but for the people. He observed how statues were placed in the temples, how symbolic gifts were distributed on religious occasions, and how art could unite the people and foster national spirit. These lessons formed an essential part of his character, making him a pharaoh focused not only on power, but on heritage, spirit, and culture. By the end of this chapter, Tutankhamun, the boy king, had become not just a young ruler, but a complete symbol of ancient Egypt, powerful in his authority, wise in his governance, concerned for his people, and creative in protecting heritage, art, and gold. His personal life. Despite his young age, Tutankhamun led a complex and multifaceted life within the palace. His role wasn't limited to ruling and making decisions. He also had to understand his personal relationships and how they shaped his future as pharaoh. The first relationship that shaped his character was with his wife and sister, Akhenaten. This wasn't merely a political marriage, but a bond filled with warmth and innocence at first. The young king found in her a friend and companion, someone to share games and curiosity with. Over time, he began to discover the meaning of royal partnership, understanding, support, and a balance between the power of the throne and personal life.
During this period, Tutankhamun, as a young king, began to dream of a strong and prosperous Egypt. He imagined new temples, vibrant markets, and the Nile River reflecting sunlight on every city and village. His dreams weren't mere fantasies, but rather realistic plans for the future, improving the lives of the people, supporting the arts, and ensuring lasting peace and justice. At the same time, the young king began to face hidden political conflicts. The high-ranking courtiers and priests sometimes tried to influence his decisions or impose their opinions under the guise of protecting religion in the kingdom. Tutankhamun gradually learned to distinguish between pure intentions and personal ambitions, and to discern who could be trusted and who should be watched closely. One of the most difficult experiences of this period was the loss of his children, mentioned without further details, which deeply affected his young heart and instilled in him a profound sense of responsibility towards his people and his family. The young king began to understand the meaning of loss, how a ruler's decisions could impact the lives of others, and how power comes with great responsibility. This period also provided Tutankhamun with an opportunity to connect more closely with the people through brief visits to the palace and gardens, meetings with soldiers and craftsmen, and listening to their problems and ideas. He learned that the ruler's personal life was directly linked to the kingdom's vision and future, and that mercy and justice were integral to authority. By the end of this chapter, Tutankhamun had become a pharaoh who embodied both strength and compassion, wisdom and innocence, and power and personal responsibility. The young king began to form his own vision for Egypt, preparing for the next stage of his reign, where his achievements, challenges, and plans for the future would become clearer on a larger and more impactful scale.
His illness and declining health. As the years passed, Tutankhamun began to experience changes in his body. This illness wasn't a terrifying or shocking event, but it served as a reminder to the young king that physical strength wasn't everything in ruling. This was a new experience for him, teaching him patience, inner strength, and the importance of relying on intellect and wisdom rather than solely on physical power. The palace witnessed changes in daily routines as the young king became more dependent on advisors and servants to help him manage daily affairs. This feeling of physical inadequacy was not merely a learning experience, it was also an opportunity to learn the art of delegation and shared responsibility. He began to see how others could support the ruler and complement his role in protecting the kingdom, and that true leadership didn't depend on one individual alone. The priests and courtiers watched him closely, offering advice on how to conserve his energy, organize his day, and navigate political and religious pressures. Through this support, Tutankhamun learned the importance of listening to experts and the wisdom accumulated over the years, and how acknowledging weakness didn't diminish his stature, but rather enhanced it if accompanied by wisdom and planning. Despite his physical challenges, the child king never ceased to participate in important affairs. He would sit with his generals, listen to their suggestions, and consider the impact of their decisions on the kingdom. This period was a crucial lesson. True rule depends not on physical strength, but on mental fortitude and the ability to make sound decisions. In quieter moments, Tutankhamun would sit by the window, watching the sunlight on the Nile and reflecting on his short life thus far. He felt the weight of responsibility,
But he was also beginning to develop a profound awareness of Egypt and its people, understanding that his legacy would not be measured by his age, but by the decisions and wisdom he would leave behind. This physical decline, though a challenge, helped the child king mature rapidly, making him more aware that ruling is not merely about a crown and power, but a continuous journey of learning, patience, and deep reflection on the future of the kingdom.
His final days. The final days of Tutankhamun's life drew near, yet the boy king remained calm and composed. He felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders more than ever, but he also understood that his legacy would not be measured by the number of years he lived, but by the quality of his decisions and the wisdom he left behind. One quiet morning, Tutankhamun sat on the palace terrace overlooking the Nile, listening to the gentle flow of the water and watching the sun's reflection on the city. He thought of the people, the temples, the soldiers who had protected him, and the artisans and artists who created under his patronage. Everything around him reminded him that Egypt was not merely land and borders, but a people, a civilization, and a spirit worthy of protection. The boy king began to bid farewell to the daily life of the palace in a symbolic way. He sat with the advisors who had accompanied him since childhood, thanked them for their patience and teaching, and listened to their final advice on how to continue the rule after him and how to preserve Egypt's legacy. He wanted to leave a silent message for all who would rule after him. Wisdom and compassion are more important than strength, and balance is more important than any temporary victory. Despite his declining health, he did not withdraw from the affairs of the kingdom. He sat with the priests to review the final rituals of the temples and recommended maintaining the stability of religion and society even after his death. He spoke with the generals and advisors about borders, about protecting the people, and about the projects he had begun and wanted to continue so that he would feel his life had not been in vain. In those days, Tutankhamun became calmer and more profound. He was no longer just a child playing and exploring, but a king who understood the value of every moment, every decision, and every small action that could affect the future of Egypt. He would contemplate by candlelight on the ornate walls, thinking about the history that future generations would hold of a young pharaoh who ruled Egypt wisely despite his youth and short life. He also began to feel a profound symbolic connection with the people. He saw the sun reflected on the temple roofs, the people walking in the markets and streets, and he knew that every decision he made would leave its mark on their lives, and that his legacy would live on in their hearts, even if his body were no longer on the throne. By the end of this chapter, Tutankhamun's final years had concluded in a peaceful and enlightened manner. The young king who had begun his reign with trepidation and caution had become a wise and compassionate pharaoh, keenly aware of the importance of his legacy and his people, and he had shown the world that true power lies not in longevity, but in the depth of his rule and the sincerity of his intentions. The kingdom mourned his passing. When Tutankhamun passed away, all of Egypt felt a profound loss, not only for the loss of a young pharaoh, but for the loss of a spirit that had bound the people and the throne in a rare way. The royal palace fell silent, and the gardens, once teeming with life, were now shrouded in quiet sorrow, as if every stone and every column mourned the departure of the child king.
The soldiers who had protected him, the courtiers who had accompanied him since childhood, and the priests who had guided him in matters of religion, art, and politics, all felt a deep emptiness. The grief was not merely a fleeting emotion, but a profound awareness of the absence of a man who carried in his heart a promise for Egypt and a passion to restore its former glory. The people outside the palace walls also felt the sorrow. In the markets and streets, people noticed the change in the atmosphere. Vendors ceased their usual singing. Children who had watched the palace ceremonies began asking about the king, and elders recounted his stories with pride and longing. Their grief was a mixture of personal loss and national pride, for Tutankhamun was not merely a pharaoh, but a symbol of childhood, wisdom, and justice all at once. During the mourning ceremonies, everyone wore black or gray, and the royal halls were adorned with flags and symbolic banners, reflecting the people's respect for the young pharaoh. Priests meticulously performed the ancient rituals, each word and gesture reflecting an acknowledgement of the child king's greatness and an understanding of his profound legacy. In these moments, the impact of Tutankhamun's reign on Egypt began to manifest. The people came to understand the value of justice, strong leadership, and wise governance. Their grief was not simply a loss, but an appreciation for the life the king had lived and the messages of strength and compassion he had left behind. Thus, despite his short life, Tutankhamun became part of Egypt's collective memory, the child king who taught the nation the meaning of leadership and demonstrated that greatness comes not from a long life, but from the legacy one leaves behind, from wise decisions, and from the love one sows in the hearts of the people.
Concealing his tomb. After the burial rites were completed, the high priests and courtiers realized that Tutankhamun's body held an immense legacy that needed to be protected from time and human greed. It was not merely a body, but a symbol of royalty, of ancient Egyptian civilization, and of the message the child king carried, the power of justice, wisdom, and art, which would endure even after his death. The plan to conceal the tomb began, employing a highly complex and ingenious method. The idea was not simply to place the burial site in a remote location, but to create a network of symbols, winding passageways, hidden doors, and walls adorned with secret messages to confound any intruder who might attempt to tamper with it. The tomb was like a magical labyrinth. Every corner and every stone within it held a message protecting the young king and affirming the sanctity of the place. The tomb was carefully designed to be a reflection of ancient Egypt, of Tutankhamun's grandeur, and of the soul's journey toward eternity. The walls were adorned with intricate reliefs depicting the king's daily life, his achievements, and his symbolic battles, as well as the tools and treasures he would need on his eternal journey. Each relief held a dual meaning, instructive to the royal spirit and practical protection against theft or vandalism. During the concealment process, courtiers and priests acted with extreme caution. The tomb's location was revealed only to the most trusted members, and special ceremonies sanctified the site, making any attempt to desecrate it religiously and socially forbidden. Even the human resources, from craftsmen to soldiers, were distributed in stages, ensuring that no one knew every detail of the site. This preserved the tomb's secrecy for centuries. The plan also held profound symbolic significance. Concealing the tomb was not merely a physical protection, but a symbol of the enduring royal legacy and the permanence of Tutankhamun's heritage. Children, the people, and the wise all knew that the young king had become part of Egypt, and that protecting him in this physical world reflected a deep respect for royal life and spirit. With the tomb's completion and concealment, Egypt knew that Tutankhamun would live on in its symbols, its art, and the hearts of its people. He was not merely a young pharaoh, but a guardian of the nation's heritage, a symbol of immortality and a link between the past, present, and future. Every stone in the tomb, every statue, and every inscription served as a secret message for future generations that wisdom, justice, and art could transcend time itself. By the end of this chapter, Tutankhamun's tomb had become an icon of secrecy and protection, a mirror reflecting the ancient Egyptians' devotion to preserving their young pharaoh's legacy. The place was not simply a grave, but a hidden temple of eternity, brimming with symbols and lessons waiting to be discovered and offer the world a glimpse into the life and legacy of one of history's greatest young kings.
Discovered after thousands of years. Thousands of years passed in Egypt, and the secret of the boy pharaoh lay buried beneath the sands and rocks, hidden from human eyes, preserving his precious legacy just as the priests and court had planned. Tutankhamun had become a living legend in the popular memory, a symbol of mystery and immortality, and no one had ever come to uncover the secrets of his tomb until the day of its great discovery. On a sunny morning in the Valley of the Kings, archaeologist Howard Carter and his team were excavating cautiously, step by step, exploring the ancient earth with an expert eye. No one knew that behind those sands lay one of history's greatest secrets. With each layer of earth they lifted, the tension grew, and hearts pounded until the first steps leading to the hidden entrance appeared. When the door opened, the team felt as if time had stood still. The scent of history, the candlelight, and an aura of mystery converged in an unforgettable moment. The tomb was exactly as it had been designed thousands of years ago, every stone, inscription, and piece of gold in its place, telling the story of the young king who ruled Egypt with a heart full of wisdom and passion. Inside the tomb, the world was amazed by its contents: golden masks, intricate statues, royal treasures, and ritual objects. Every piece bore witness to the life of Tutankhamun, to the magnificence of Egyptian art, and to the ingenuity used to conceal the tomb and protect it from time and tomb robbers. The details of the inscriptions told stories about the king, about the people, and about the profound relationship between the king and the gods. The moment of discovery was also a lesson for the entire world about the genius of the ancient Egyptians in preserving their heritage and their ability to leave a lasting legacy that transcends millennia. This was not merely an archaeological discovery, but a journey through time into the heart of a young pharaoh who lived a short but inspiring life. After this discovery, Tutankhamun became a global symbol of mystery and immortality, a young king whose young age did not prevent him from leaving an enduring legacy. Every piece of gold, every inscription, and every stone within his tomb became part of humanity's story with history, a tale of power, wisdom, art, and immortality. By the end of this chapter, the world discovered that Tutankhamun did not disappear with his death, but remained alive in his treasures, his art, and the hearts of all who knew his name, becoming an enduring legend in the history of Egypt and the world.
How he became an enduring legend. After the discovery of his tomb, Tutankhamun was no longer just a young pharaoh who lived thousands of years ago, but an enduring symbol of ancient Egyptian history and civilization. His story was not merely the tale of a young king, but a story of a legacy that transcends time, of a child king who left an indelible mark on the entire world. The tomb captivated scholars, historians, and artists alike. Every gold artifact, every statue, and every inscription became a window into the life of ancient Egypt, its art, religions, and social and political practices. Tutankhamun became a pivotal figure in understanding ancient Egypt, not only as a pharaoh, but as a symbol of wisdom, beauty, and power, despite his youth.
Stories about him spread everywhere, from museums to books, from documentaries to university lectures. His name became synonymous with mystery and beauty, and with a history that could be uncovered thousands of years from now. Scholars used his discoveries to understand ancient ways of life, medicine, engineering, and art, while the public marveled at the beauty of his treasures and reveled in the allure of the boy Pharaoh's legend. Tutankhamun also became a source of inspiration for modern art and popular culture. His golden designs, ornate masks, and the symbols he carried with him to the afterlife influenced artists, designers, and even filmmakers who found in his story a blend of mystery, power, and timeless beauty. His cultural legacy extended beyond treasures and gold, encompassing lessons in leadership and courage, and an understanding of the importance of preserving history and civilization. He became the epitome of greatness, demonstrating that it is not measured by age, but by the impact of wise deeds on the lives of others. By the end of this chapter, Tutankhamun had become a true legend in human history. The little child king who lived a short but full life of wisdom, art, and courage became an eternal symbol, teaching generations the value of heritage, the beauty of civilization, and the importance of humanity remaining connected to its history and culture, no matter how long time passes or how circumstances change.
And so ends the journey of Tutankhamun, the child king who, despite his short life, created an immortal legend. From his childhood within the palace walls to his wise and courageous reign, through his adventures and achievements, and finally his legacy that has endured for thousands of years, his story was a journey filled with mystery, power, and timeless Egyptian beauty.